All right, so we've got some people using Excel, we've got some people using STOCKOUT and some other software. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start talking about restock limits. Restock limits are back, unfortunately. Let me know if you are currently affected by restock limits. Type something into the chat. Most people are, some people are not, but you probably wouldn't be on this webinar if you were not. So we've got a question already. Cool. AJ says, I can hear you. Let's go ahead and. All right. So we're going to talk about some restock limit systems, some inventory systems that are really focused on restock limits and improving restock limits and kind of hedging your bets against stockouts and overstocking, which can cause stockouts as well. A little bit about me, if you don't know who I am. My name is Chelsea Cohen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of STOCKOUT. I've been a seller since 2014 and really been immersed in inventory management for actually over 4 years now, and spoken to hundreds of sellers about inventory, start building inventory systems specifically for the Amazon space, specifically for e-commerce. And also I'm very well versed in restock limits and, you know, the life cycle of restock limits and what we've been able to do over the past year or so to help others to improve their business even through the face of restock. So yes, restock limits are back. We're going to talk about what you need to know about restock limits. What are those specifics that Amazon has kind of established regarding inventory and what they care about in terms of inventory, and how you can work your business into improving things to help Amazon know that you are good at inventory and that you deserve more capacity. Then we're going to talk about what to do now. We have a unique opportunity right now in the month and a half leading up to Black Friday to get ourselves into a better position in terms of restock limits and in terms of inventory, especially with the Prime early access that is going to happen in what, 6 days. So hopefully you guys are ready for that. Really is an opportunity to drive improvements in restock limits. And then we're going to talk about what should you do next? What systems do you need to have in place when things start getting crazy with Black Friday, with Cyber Monday, and into the holiday season for you to maximize your sales and minimize your risks. All right, so first and foremost, it's important to understand that the most important metric for Amazon regarding inventory is sell-through. Sell-through is the thing that touches all different aspects, every different aspect of your inventory performance index. And your inventory performance index is that score that Amazon gives you to indicate how good you are at managing your inventory. So every different lever that is involved in that score is affected by sell-through. If we know that that's the case, then we need to know how Amazon actually defines sell-through, and they actually do give you a definition. And the definition is that your FBA rolling 90-day sell-through rate is the number of your units sold and shipped over the past 90 days divided by the average number of units available at fulfillment centers during that time. So what that essentially means in basic math is that you take the amount that you've sold in 90 days and you divide it by the average units that you had available at the warehouse, and that's going to give you your sell-through. So if you sold 9,000 units in 90 days and you had 3,000 units available at any given time, then you have a monthly turnover rate or a monthly sell-through, and that is represented by the number 3. Similarly, if you had 9,000 units sold and 9,000 units that you were carrying, that's a quarterly turnover rate, and the number would be 1. So you can go into your inventory dashboard and you can look and see what is that number for you specifically, and how do you work to increase that number. You want that number to be increased. I would say 2.5, 2 to 3, those within that range is good. Being lower than 2 and being in the 1 to 1.5 range is something that you need to work on, especially with restock limits now. So we'll talk about utilization. Utilization is how much space is already being taken up. If you have 10,000 units that is allowed within restock limits, how much do you have of that space available? So utilization counts against your maximum inventory level. The utilization is made up of FBA available inventory, all incoming shipments, and that includes working shipments, so shipments that haven't been shipped out, they're currently in working status, in transit, and receiving. You also have unfulfillable inventory that is included in utilization, and all of those together equate to your total utilization quantity. You've got pending removal orders and reserve inventory. Amazon has said that they're not included, but as we've dealt with other sellers and the data provided through the community, we've found that that's not true. That's not the case. So removal orders are going to also affect your utilization. And so one of the good things to do would be to delete any shipments you're not currently using. All right, so the relationship between your sell-through and your utilization is going to be that number, that 90 days worth of sales, and then your average units is essentially your utilization. So if you improve either one of those things, you're going to improve your sell-through, which is going to help Amazon to see that you should actually have more units available to you. This is a case study of someone who really focused on their inventory turn, their sell-through rate. They had 300 SKUs and had a sell-through rate of 1, which means they were turning over every quarter. And so really focusing on smaller orders more frequently and increasing sales, those two things together help to get the inventory turn from 1 to 2. So in a much better range. It will help you to improve your IPI score. So if you're in a position where you are kind of teetering on that border of your IPI score being in the danger zone, which is under 400, if you dip under 400, not only are you going to have restock limits issues, which is a restriction on the number of units that you have, but you're also going to have storage volume issues. And that means the amount of space that you're actually able to have at the warehouse. So that's the number of units versus the number of space, or the amount of space. And that does not always match. So I had someone who contacted me last year, and he couldn't figure out why he had a certain amount of inventory that he was able to send in as far as the number of units. He couldn't figure out why he was still being blocked from sending anything in. He had hardly any inventory in the warehouses, and yet he couldn't make shipments. So when I looked at his data, I ended up looking at his storage volume and the amount of cubic feet that he was allotted. And we factored that his storage volume was the size of a refrigerator. So he had all these products and he had to fit them within a refrigerator. So that gave him a picture of why he was not able to ship in hardly any inventory. So you really want to focus on your sell-through rate to make sure that your IPI score is in good shape, because restock limits will be the least of your problems. Storage volume is going to completely decimate your ability to send inventory into Amazon consistently. All right, let's talk about the things that actually improve your restock limits, right? So things that improve your restock limits, of course, we're talking about increasing sell-through. Increasing sell-through, that's kind of the overarching goal. Now, here are some of the ways that you can increase sell-through. Smaller orders more frequently. Figuring out how much you are going to need. And we'll talk a little bit about that, about how to calculate doing smaller orders and what is considered a good range. And then you will go on to look at fulfillment by merchant. If you have inventory that you can send in FBM, that can help to increase your restock limits as well. And the reason that that is that fulfilled by merchant sales contribute to that top number without any inventory being at that warehouse. So you've got sales increasing up here, but you don't have the inventory stored at FBA increasing. So your ratio then becomes improved by the fact that you've got additional sales without additional inventory stored. So that's one of the tips on fulfillment by merchant. And then you have multi-channel fulfillment. Multi-channel fulfillment is, let's say, connecting your Shopify account to be fulfilled by Amazon. Those Shopify sales contribute to restock limits because they contribute to that top line sales number. Those are counted as sales in the restock limits calculation. And Amazon has come out and said that as well. The other thing that is kind of a hidden thing within that is that Amazon can sometimes favor those sellers that do have multi-channel fulfillment. They are going to tend to award you more in terms of restock limits because you've got that connection. And actually, last third quarter, they were essentially bribing sellers with increased restock limits if they did multi-channel fulfillment. Seller friend of mine who was selling reached out to me at one point, and his restock limits had been doubled overnight. And he had gotten an email saying, "We're doubling your restock limits so that you will start selling multi-channel fulfillment. Let us know if you want more and we will give you more." And right to this email, and we actually launched it. If you go to STOCKOUT.com/restock, which is actually where we update all of the restock data, you'll see a video on there of when we broke that story, so to speak, in terms of what Amazon was doing. They want your Shopify data, so they want you to fulfill through multi-channel fulfillment. So they'll tend to favor someone who's selling multi-channel fulfillment. All right. Feel free to type in any questions if you have any questions, or as we go along, I'm happy to answer them. So let's talk about the things that hurt your restock limits. Obviously, stockouts is something that will hurt your restock limits. It decreases your 90-day sales. Excess inventory, it increases that bottom number negatively, right, against you. Stale shipments, like we talked about, the shipments that you're not using, they also count as inventory. So you want to delete those shipments. So go into your back end and look at if you have any working shipments or open shipments that you're not going to be using. And then slow sellers. Slow sellers are a drag on both sides. You're not increasing the sales numbers on the top, and you have excess inventory in the bottom, which is similar to that second point that we have. All right, so what do we do now? What is we've got a couple other things. What are some of the actions that you want to start taking right away? As we mentioned, we have to start thinking of going in and deleting those unnecessary shipments. Look at any flash sales. We've got our Prime Day, our second Prime Day early access sale coming up. Start looking at those products that you can create flash sales for. Anything that has the option of, you've got excess inventory, it's a slow seller, it's something that you want to move. Liquidation is another option. And I'll talk a little bit more about liquidation. I recommend it as a last resort if you can't move it by a flash sale, but liquidation is an option. Amazon has a liquidation service that you can use. There's also a service called Backtrack, back-track.com, and another service called returnsworldwide.com. You can check those guys out. They take your inventory, they make sure that it's sellable, then they go and sell it, and they'll split the profits with you. That's how those two services work. And then you have removal orders if you want to remove that inventory and sell it on another channel. Set up FBM. That's an important thing for you to look at doing so that you don't get into a position where if Amazon doesn't check in your inventory, you'll then stock out. So setting up FBM is a safeguard against stockouts, and it also, like we said, boosts sell-through. Activate multi-channel fulfillment is a good way to boost sell-through. And then there's Amazon warehousing and distribution. This is something that is by invite only. I would recommend going into your email that you get all of your Amazon emails and see if you've got an invitation. You can type in into your search Amazon warehousing and distribution or Amazon warehousing. You can also type in maybe invitation and see if Amazon has sent you an email invitation. It's something that I wouldn't rely on fully, but it's something that I think is a good option. And what this is Amazon created a new service. They did it concurrently with launching restock limits, which is a little bit sneaky and something that I think is a deliberate and a smart action of theirs, but is I think it's the reason that restock limits came back. But we can get into that another time. But the reason that I think that is that when you use Amazon warehousing and distribution, they waive your restock limits for anything that you have with them. So it's acting like a 3PL, and they're going to send inventory and they're going to pay attention to your numbers on your FBA and send inventory in from their warehouses, their upstream warehouses into Amazon. You're going to pay fees. The fees are fairly reasonable depending on what you're paying currently to your 3PL. So it may make more sense. It may not make more sense financially for you. But if you get a wave of those restock limits and you don't have restock limit restrictions because you're with Amazon warehousing and distribution, it may be worth it to you. However, I would not close my 3PL and not put all of my inventory in that warehouse because it's a new service and you don't know whether it's going to be it work like clockwork. You want to make sure that it works well before you put all your eggs in that basket. And if your inventory gets stuck at that warehouse and you don't have a 3PL backup, you could be stocked out because Amazon doesn't have their stuff together. And we've seen that Amazon has had problems in the past with their warehousing, with getting things checked in. So it's not impossible for you to need to send inventory into the warehouse and them to miss out on that. All right, let's talk about the action steps for systems to adopt. Because there's action steps for what are these things that you can do right now? What are these triggers to pull? But how can we, whether restock limits is here or not, how can we make sure that we are always prepared? And there are a couple of different things that I recommend. So first, faster FBA shipping times. Used to be common that we would create our shipments from FBA, from Amazon, and create the labels and send them to China, and then China would ship our stuff over. Nowadays, since that counts against your utilization, you don't want to do that. You want to create those shipments when your product is stateside, when your product is local and has landed in the local marketplace. So that's something that most people have switched over since 2020, but it's something that if you haven't switched over, look into doing that so that you can keep your utilization down, so that you don't block inventory that you have ready to ship in with inventory that's sitting on a boat somewhere. The other thing is that it will negatively impact your restock limits and negatively impact your sell-through and negatively impact your inventory performance index score. The next thing to consider is something called flexible logistics. This is essentially backup planning, and I'm going to walk through in a minute what flexible logistics is and why it can be so effective. And I'll also throw in a little bonus tip on trucking, on some things that you can do to potentially get your inventory checked into Amazon faster and not come into the problems that people were having last year with waiting 5 or 6 weeks for things to check in and it leading to stockouts. Then we're going to talk about min-max restocking. This is the system that I mentioned earlier about how do we create smaller orders more frequently. It's a system that you can set up that becomes a little bit more like autopilot and really helps you to create more of a system rather than guesswork which is what a lot of inventory systems currently are operating as. And then lastly, we're going to talk about inventory-minded marketing and explain what that is. And in essence, it's a system to get your marketing team and your inventory team working together so that you have more proactive approach to both your inventory planning and your marketing planning. All right, so flexible logistics. This is something that smart sellers started doing in 2020 and 2021 to hedge their bets against systems breaking down, because we saw a lot of systems break down across the supply chain over those years. It used to be very easy and reliable to order your product 60 days in advance. It's produced within 30 days, it ships within 30 days, it arrives just fine, and you don't have to worry. That time has passed, and I don't think that it's going to come back for at least the next few years, if it ever does come back. So you need to have a plan B for your plan A and a plan C for your plan B, and always be able to pivot no matter who lets you down. It's something I call the golden rule, which is never let anyone have all your stuff. Put another way, it's don't put all your eggs in one basket. But what does that actually mean? What that means is if you're ordering a truck or a container load of inventory, you don't want to only have that container load sitting on that boat and then it gets stuck at port. If you've got inventory that gets stuck at port for an extended time, or gets stuck in the Suez Canal, like happened earlier, and we all heard about, right? Cost billions of dollars for sellers. If you don't, if you have all your eggs in one basket, you're going to get into trouble. So you want to have a backup inventory. So instead of ordering a container load, you would want to order a container load plus, let's say, a month or two of inventory. The month or two of inventory would be something that you would store in supplier's warehouse. Now, this can get a little bit more difficult with your cash flow because you're tying up more money. So the thing that you want to do is you want to negotiate with your supplier on a couple of different points. One is that a lot of suppliers will hold your inventory without charging you storage fees for at least, let's say, 3 months. So you say, I'm gonna order this big order. It's going to be bigger than normal. Can you please hold this excess inventory for me? Then the other thing that you want to do is you say, okay, I'll pay you the 30% for the entire order, but I only want to pay you that final payment, that 70% or whatever your terms are, for what I'm shipping out when I ship it out. So when I ship out my ocean freight, I'll pay you that 70% for that, but we're going to wait on paying the other portion of that invoice, so that you're not extending that extra inventory or that extra cost, and you have improved your cash flow a bit. Then you have that inventory sitting there, and if your ocean freight gets stuck, you know that you have this lever to pull. You say, okay, my inventory stuck. If after this date I don't have it, I don't have any movement with that freight, I will be able to ship by air that inventory that's sitting there. It's very expensive to ship by air, so the only time that you're going to do that is if you absolutely have to. Because oftentimes, even though it's really expensive to ship air freight or air express, it is more cost effective than running out of stock. Running out of stock, besides it costing you more money in terms of lost sales, it'll cost you money in terms of restock limits. Your IPI score is going to be affected, and then you have to, of course, re-rank that product afterwards. So it generally is a lot more cost effective to ship by air than to let yourself run out of stock. Of course, and then you go into sending that inventory to your 3PL, sending it to FBA, and then you want to bring that entire concept local. Now you have your 3PL. So just as you had your supplier, you'd have your 3PL, and then your trucking would be kind of like your ocean freight. You would not want to put everything into that truck. So your full truckload or less than truckload, and you've got inventory sitting at your 3PL. if you send your truck to your trailer to Amazon, and Amazon takes 5 weeks to check it in, and you're burning through your inventory, you want to have the option to pull some of the 3PL inventory and send it small parcel delivery, which is of course more expensive, but it's going to help you to get into FBA more quickly, because when that inventory arrives at FBA, it's going to be loaded directly into the warehouse and checked in. Now here's the tip with trailer shipping, with less than truckload, with full truckload. And the reason it sometimes can take longer for it to check in. You know it's been delivered, and then it takes 4 weeks to check in. You know, why is that happening? I've got a friend who runs a company called Amazing Logistics, and I got on the phone with him, and he just started spilling all this stuff that he knows. It made a huge impact on how I looked at and how I acted on shipping. And so first, as a caveat, make your 3PLs your best friends. We have tended in the past to treat them as order takers. I know that I have in the past ordered or placed my shipment on FBA on Amazon, and then sent the shipping instructions to my 3PL and said, hey, here you go. Can you ship this? It's already been paid for. And they're so busy that they're just going to do it. But if you get on a call with them and you say, I've had trouble with getting my inventory checked in on time, it's been a couple of different orders, it took 3 weeks, it took 5 weeks, how do I improve my check-in times? And this is what he told me when I was talking to him about this. He says, the reason that you have check-in problems is that Amazon owns most of these trailers. And because they own most of these trailers, and they also have contracts with some companies that even if they don't own the trailers, they essentially can tell them what to do with the trailers, because those trucking companies want to keep that business with Amazon. So they kind of strong arm them. And what happens is a truck will show up, and instead of unloading directly into the warehouse, it'll have to drop that trailer and drive away. And usually they'll drive away with an empty Amazon trailer and start it all over again. But when there are warehousing problems, and we've had a lot of problems with in the past year or so, had a lot of problems with striking and a lot of problems with turnover. And Amazon, in I think a span last year, in the fall, in a span of 2-3 months, turned over 400,000 warehousing employees in that short period of time. So they were having a lot of trouble with keeping employees. And then of course you have to spin up training employees. So you had a lot of trailers that were dumped and left, and essentially were not touched for those 4 weeks. And that's why you get delivery time, and then this huge gap before you get check-in. It's a huge problem, but Amazon has these contracts and they own these trailers, so they can do it because that's what they felt they needed to do for their logistics issues. What you can do about it though is there's something called live unload. And so that's what you want to do, is when you call your 3PL, you say, hey, I have trouble with my check-in times. What can you tell me about working with companies that will do a live unload? And there are companies that do live unload. And what live unload is that they'll show up and they won't drop that trailer. They'll empty it directly into the warehouse. So when they have their delivery time is essentially within, is essentially their check-in time within a couple of days, because it'll, sit on the dock for a little while they take time to churn through that check-in. But that is a live unload. There's a company called Uber Freight that does this. There are plenty of other companies that do this. They may have later delivery dates. So Amazon may prioritize their Amazon contracted companies, and they get an earlier delivery date, maybe even a week earlier than your live unload delivery date. But if you've got a delivery date that's a week prior to, your live unload delivery date, but then you have 4 weeks to actually get it checked in, the net check-in time, I call it net check-in time, for this live unload is going to be a lot sooner, because even though the delivery time is later, the check-in time is earlier. So that's all you really care about, is when is it going to check in, not when is it going to be delivered. All right, so once you've got the systems in place with your small parcel delivery right? And your small parcel delivery, for those who don't know that term, is essentially the loose cartons. You're not sending pallets on a big truck. You're sending the loose cartons and they're going, let's say, UPS or DHL or something like that. Then you want to, like I mentioned, have an FBM option, a fulfilled by merchant option. Even if you don't think you're going to use it, you want to have that as an option. One, because we talked about how it can influence your restock limits, but also if you get into that circumstance where Amazon doesn't check your stuff in, you don't want to lose out on the opportunity to make sales. Even if Amazon is your only sales channel, you don't want it to be your only distribution channel, which means you don't want to not be able to fulfill orders to your customers. So you can take sales on Amazon and you can fulfill those orders. You're not stuck with FBM's the only option. All right, let's talk about min-max restocking. A couple of years ago, I went to a factory that did print on demand books. And they had these huge vats of ink. They had these huge rolls of paper that they would load into the machines. And since they were print on demand and they had to turn over products really quickly, their delivery turnaround times were within a matter of days, maybe a week. So they always had to have raw materials on hand. They had adopted a system that, that can be looked at as min-max restocking. Those ink vats would sit on a weighted system, and the ink would be used down to a point and would hit a minimum weight. And they would know that the computer would tell them as an alert, hey, you are at this minimum weight. You need to place a new order so you don't run out. And it was based on their capacity. We refer to it as sales velocity, but they looked at how, what's our average printing and how much ink do we use on average on a daily or a weekly basis. So they had their minimum, and then they had a maximum. What is the most, what is the most ink that we should keep on a general basis? So we should keep this much ink, and we need to use it through to this bottom amount, this minimum amount of ink, and then refill it to this maximum amount of ink. The same thing can be done with your particular business. If you've got, let's say 90 days worth of inventory, and you want to sell 90 days worth of inventory, then you sell through to, let's say, 45 days worth of inventory, then you stock back up to that 90 days of inventory. That is going to help you to systemize things a bit better, right? So some of the benefits are you're able to optimize your inventory levels. You are able to reduce stockouts because you have that minimum, and that minimum should be, I would say, a good rule of thumb is 30 days is the lowest, and 30 days tended to be okay before our systems or before the supply chain got to be as unreliable as it has tended to be over the past couple of years. So we say 45 days is a good rule of thumb nowadays. And there's another reason why we want to keep that minimum above that 30 days, above that, at that maybe 45 days. It's something called geo-ranking. And geo-ranking is something that Amazon does that you may not be able to perceive if you're just looking at their front end, Amazon.com. Amazon's most important promise is to their customers, and they have something that they call Prime, and they like to do 2-day delivery. That's what their customers expect. So they want to keep that promise. And if you don't have enough inventory spread out across the country, say you have 10 days worth of inventory, it's very hard to take 10 days worth of inventory and spread it across the entire country. Therefore, you may end up with inventory in California, you have inventory in Florida and New York, and in the middle of the country, you don't have a lot of inventory. So someone, let's say in Utah, orders your product, they may not be able to get it to them in 2 days. And that creates a negative customer experience, which is what we know Amazon is very against. So what they'll tend to do is, let's say in Utah, because you don't have inventory that they think they can get there on time, they'll start pushing your product down the ranking, and your competitors will be more likely to be ordered instead of you, because Amazon is essentially kind of encouraging that. They also would likely not award you the ads in those particular areas. So you may see that your product is doing great in California because you're in California and that's where you're doing your search, but it may be in a completely different state in terms of its ads and its ranking for different parts of the country. That's called geo ranking. So one of the ways that you can check this is you could put in a different zip code, right? There's that little thing where you can say what zip code you're in, and you might be able to see with that new zip code a different situation for what's happening with your products. So it's just kind of a little tip. We've had a lot of sellers notice a decrease in sales as they've had a decrease in their inventory levels. Oops. All right, then you have, because you have this min-max restocking, and like I said, 45 to 90 days is a decent rule of thumb. I would say if you're trying to increase your sell-through, which is what we're ultimately trying to do to increase restock limits, it would be a good rule of thumb to do between 45 and 75 days if you can stand it. It may be that you don't want to do that because it's hard to get your inventory in stock on time. So you might have to push to 90 days, but that would be, the range that I would go for. Okay, then you would, because you're not overstocking, because you have that maximum amount, you are reducing your FBA storage fees. Then you have a lot of times I talk to people and the owner operators of the business are running the inventory because it's so important to get it right, because that's a lot of money that you're expending. And so if you get it wrong, you can stock out, or you could deploy more capital than you need to. So so essentially you do it yourself, and it's something that most people actually hate. A lot of people really hate inventory, and they only do it because they have to. When you adopt min-max restocking, this is something that you can actually start passing this task over to your VA. You don't have to pass everything. You can be the final check, and I would recommend being the final check. But a lot of those inventory tasks now can go to a virtual assistant, an inventory manager, and then you are freed up to do a lot of the things that you love, like maybe product research or advertising. All right, we're going to wrap up with inventory-minded marketing. This is a system that I've been teaching for about at least 2 years now, maybe 2.5 years. And it has been an evolving system over time. But what it's doing is moving inventory from being a reactionary role to being actually something we can proactively use to improve our business on both the marketing side and on the inventory side. So I call it, like I said, I call it inventory-minded marketing. And that's a concept of getting the inventory and the marketing team to work together. I've had talked to a lot of sellers, and a lot of times the marketing team doesn't know what the inventory team is doing, and the inventory team doesn't know what the marketing team is doing. So this helps to resolve that. First and foremost, if the inventory team doesn't know that you're going to be running a sale that's going to increase sales by, let's say, 10%, they're planning based on a specific burn rate. If you increase that burn rate, or if you do a flash sale and sell, an extra 1,000 units, that's going to mess up their planning, and they might not be able to predict against that until it's too late and they're running out of stock. So marketing plans should be vetted against inventory plans. Before you go and change your marketing strategy, give that planning to the inventory team. And I'm going to talk about a template that you can use to be able to communicate your marketing plans to your inventory team. Then there are inventory. For a little while, it was just marketing plans to the inventory team. Then we started realizing that inventory actually has to take a lot more responsibility to protect against stocking out and overstocking. And this will have to do with, actually improving marketing. You can help marketing to improve inventory, and then essentially you're also improving marketing, you're improving sell-through, you're improving your cash flow, and you're recovering capital to deploy into areas that are going to actually make you more money, right? So let's go through first of all, what the marketing plan would look like. This is a template that you can get at SoStock.com/tools. It's a free template, and we call it the Inventory Minded Marketing Planner, or the Inventory Planner. And it looks like this. There's a tutorial that'll walk you through the details, but roughly the first thing that you want is, what is the sales velocity that we're looking at? Are we looking at past sales, 30 days, 30, 60, 90-day combination? Is it a new product and we're launching and we're doing a manual velocity and we're estimating maybe it's 10 units a day that we're starting with? Or are we looking at last year's sales because we're estimating a Christmas time order? So you get that down, and then you want to look at a trend. If I'm pulling data from last year, do I want to look at this year versus last year, what my growth trend was? Do I want to add that, or quarter over quarter? Am I going to do a PPC campaign that's going to increase sales by 10%? Those things need to be part of your marketing plan that goes to your inventory team. And then you have the lightning deals, or general sales events, email campaigns, influencer campaigns. This is a date range that you would choose. You'd say, okay, from this date to this date, I'm running this campaign, and I think I'm going to move 500 units. That needs to go to the inventory team as well, so that they can tell you, okay, that's great that you want to do that. You can do that with all of these SKUs, but this other SKU that you wanted to do this with, you're actually going to run out of stock if you do that. So you need to not do it with that. So that would be why you would want to give them that data. Same thing with seasonal sales spikes. Pick that date range. Let's say it's summer. And then what is the percentage increase that you think is going to occur based on that product during that period of time? All right, let's go ahead, and we're going to wrap up with the inventory reports that the inventory team needs to give to the marketing team. These are reports, if you're using, I know some of you guys are current SoStock users. So if you're using SoStock, these are reports that either already exist in or can be built in your SoStock account. The first one is the SoStock risk report. And if you don't have SoStock, the calculation for creating a SoStock risk report is right down here at the bottom. You calculate total inventory divided by your sales velocity, and that's going to give you your days of remaining stock to figure out when you might stock out. So you have your SoStock risk report in SoStock right now, and this may change in the near future, but in SoStock right now, we call it the Stockouts Future report. So you can pull that report. So, and you can, if you like, change it to SoStock risk report. You're looking at the total days of stock out. Is going to have total days of stock out, and then when is that going to stock out? When is that going to happen? If you see that you've got, let's say, 8 days that you're going to stock out, that 8 days could be avoided if your marketing team knows about it. Maybe your marketing team is running an aggressive ad campaign, and they could turn off some of those ads and avoid stocking out, avoid those 8 days of stock out, because they're not driving sales so aggressively. They're also going to be saving money. Besides not stocking out, they're saving money by not running those ads. So you save on ad spend, so you make more money on every product that's sold, and you avoid the stock out. So you can save on both sides, save on lost revenue and save on unnecessary ad spend. So this goes to the marketing team to be able to do that. Then you have the slow sellers report. This report is not a default in SoStock, because this has to do with your individual business, and you need to decide what those minimum and maximum ranges are. And this report works like this. you want a minimum and a maximum range. These are not your complete loser products. These are your products that they're not performing up to your standards. They're not performing great, but they're not complete failures. You think, I could potentially save this. So if you can save this product, what you'll want to do is you want to set a minimum and a maximum for, let's say for your business, it's between 5 and 20 sales a day. Once you get over that 20 sales a day, you feel like this is a successful product. But within that slow sellers range, it could go either way. You want to boost this because this is dragging on your restock limits. This is slowing down your sales. This is clogging up that utilization. And it's also costing you money. If it's a slow seller and it's going to take you 6 months to sell through that product, every single month you're making less and less money per SKU because you're paying storage fees. So it is dragging on your profitability. It's also dragging on your cash flow. You want to increase those sales so you can take that money and put it back into investing in new products, in marketing, or just going on a vacation, right? So that's your slow seller. If you don't address this, if you don't keep your eyes on these and you don't address getting those up out the top of the list, they could drop to the next list, right? Drop out the bottom to the next list, which is the liquidation report. The liquidation report is the stuff that you don't plan on restocking. You actually need to sell through this as quickly as possible and get it out of FBA. So this is a minimum, let's say under 5 units a day. Under 5 units a day, I'm going to get rid of this product. It's costing me too much. It's going to cost you, like I said, more money every single month. And that's money that's just tied up. It's costing you a lot in terms of your restock limits. So 2 things that you could do. You could sell through it or you could remove it. I recommend selling through because when you sell through that inventory, it's going to do 2 things. It's going to actually affect both of those numbers. Selling through, you can improve that bottom number by reducing the total amount of inventory you're holding at Amazon. And that top number, you are increasing sales. So it will impact both sides. If you choose the other option, which is to remove it, you're only impacting that bottom number. So that would be my second choice. Like I mentioned, liquidation would be second to actually doing a flash sale. So this liquidation report is really just a very, very slow seller report. And it's not that you necessarily have to liquidate it by using a liquidation service or by removing it from Amazon. You could also liquidate it by selling through, and that's the first choice, having a flash sale, dropping the price, whatever you have to do, bundling it with another product. That's been successful for some. If you've got a bestseller and you've got this other product, you could bundle it together and then you could increase sales on both sides. All right, so this is a report, again, that goes to the marketing team. All of these reports should influence the marketing plan. So it's kind of like a perfect cycle. You've got the marketing plan that helps the inventory team to improve what they're doing in planning for inventory. And then you have the inventory reports that go to improving the marketing plan for the marketers and starting to take more responsibility for influencing inventory. So they should be influencing each other. All right, lastly, we have the overstock report. The overstock report is a report that you want to use essentially for excess inventory. This is going to include generally many of the SKUs from your liquidation report and from your slow sellers report. However, your best sellers can also show up in the overstock report. I would say a good rule of thumb would be anything over 90 units a day in inventory is going to be considered overstock. So when you look at overstock or excess inventory, you can think of it in 2 different ways. Excess inventory is either an asset or a liability. It can be a liability when you know that it's going to long-term cost you more money than it's making you because of all those storage fees and because of possibly stocking out because you have too much inventory blocking the inventory that you actually have to get into Amazon. So in that way, it's a liability. What you can do with it, though, is to actually shift it into becoming an asset. It can be an asset that you have excess inventory. And it can be an asset because you can use it a couple of different ways. You can, let's say you've got a bestseller and you want to increase the rank on a specific keyword. You have the asset in that excess inventory to drive a lot of sales to that keyword pretty aggressively, right? So you can use that inventory to boost your rankings. You can also, in the process of boosting your rankings by increasing sell-through, it's increasing restock limits because we're increasing that top number and we're decreasing that bottom number again. You're clearing space, you're avoiding fees, and you're starting to recover some of that lost capital or that tied up capital. So this goes to your marketing team. The other thing, the last thing I will say about inventory-minded marketing that you want the marketing team to also look at is items that show up on your overstock report and on your slow sellers report. Because you have to market your slow sellers to come out the top of that list into being more viable. And the way that you need to do that, of course, is increasing traffic, increasing sales, increasing ranking. And you can do that by using that asset of excess inventory to drive sales, to increase ranking, to make that a more viable product. So that is a kind of a fun thing for you to take a look at when you are trying to market those products. That's all I have for you guys. Thank you guys so much. Let me know if you have any questions. We do have a 30-day free trial of StockOut. If you want to even just come in, run those reports, see what your inventory-minded marketing plan might look like over the next 30 days, I would highly suggest taking a look and coming up with a game plan for the next 30 days leading up to your Black Friday, making sure that you have a plan for restock limits. This will help to guide you in that plan. I'm going to send out the replay, so feel free to look over some of those points on what those action plans are. And if you need to, if you want to connect with us, you can reach out to StockOut.com/connect. You can also, I would say, we've got that StockOut.com/tools, which is also a resource available. We've got a handful of tools that are extremely helpful to increasing your profit margins, to managing your inventory, to grab that inventory planner that we talked about. And then lastly, StockOut.com/news. That's a weekly newsletter that we put out, and it's not like your standard newsletters. Standard newsletters, in my opinion, are too long, didn't read. We are very concise with it. We dive deeply into the issues from a seller-minded focus, and a lot of sellers utilize our news as the #1 news source that they currently go to for Amazon seller news. It's a lot of fun. I personally work on some of those stories, and so it's a lot of fun to really be up on what's going on and stay informed. So yeah, check out StockOut.com. If you guys don't have any questions, I haven't seen any questions pop up. I hope this really is helpful to you and that it really helps you to prepare better for Q4 and beyond. And really, once we get rid of restock limits, which may happen at the beginning of the year, hopefully, may or may not, keep these systems in place, because you never know when Amazon's going to bring them back. And regardless, it's just going to make your life better and easier. It's going to increase your profit margin, increase your sales, and help you to build a more systemized business. All right, thank you guys so much. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next one.